Now, before I wrap up, I want to do a quick primer on just the history of the world in terms of organisms. And so the way that we're going to break this down is we're going to kind of start down here at the bottom with the creation of the Earth, and you're going to see a lot of this kind of empty seeming stuff here at the bottom. That's going to be the Precambrian. Then we're going to get to this period here we'll call the Paleozoic, where you start to see more and more stuff. It starts to look a little bit more familiar, more animals, more plants. Then we'll get to the Mesozoic, which you guys will be familiar with. That's kind of the age of the dinosaurs and the reptiles. And then lastly, this last little part here is going to be the Cenozoic, which is going to be our era. This is more like the age of the mammals. So briefly, the geologic timescale. The Precambrian is from the start of the Earth till the Cambrian explosion, which was around 540 million years ago. Now, this is critical because most of our firsts happened here. This is where we first got life, which would have been prokaryotic to start. This is where we first got eukaryotic cells. This is where we developed things like aerobic respiration, photosynthesis. This is where we started to get multicellularity. So this is the part where we kind of got all the pieces in place, but we didn't really get most of the animals and plants and things that you guys now think of as life. But we got all the precursors needed to get to those guys. Now, the Paleozoic starts out with the Cambrian explosion, where we start to see this huge diversity of animals starting to come into being. So the Earth is going to start to kind of look like what we think of it now. We also start to see plants move on land, so we start to get, a green land, versus before, if you would have looked, it would have just been dirt and rocks and maybe some algae and such, but it would not have been like forests or grasses or any of that. That didn't happen until around 500 to 475 million years ago. So within the time frame of the Paleozoic here, because this is from about 540 million years ago to, as you can see here, about 250, if we're just kind of giving it a general time frame. So this really allowed for us to get most of the things that you guys now recognize as life. We got reptiles, we got amphibians, we got fish, we've got early plants, we got most of the things that are seemingly normal, that are seemingly modern. Now, we did not get modern mammals during this time. We didn't have birds yet. We didn't really have dinosaurs. So most of this stuff was still precursors, but you'd look at it and say, that's a multicellular animal. That's a plant. It's not a flowering plant. It's not exactly what I'm used to. But you'd think, okay, this is a prehistoric world. It's not like something absolutely insane and crazy and barren and lifeless. You'd say this looks like it could be a fairly lush world. Now, this ends with the worst mass extinction ever, the Permian mass extinction. The Permian mass extinction wiped out over 90% of all aquatic life and over half of all the species that were on land. So this is called the Great Dying. This was horrific. This ultimately is when we started to see mammals and reptiles vying to take over, and the Permian mass extinction especially just tore apart mammals. And so that allowed for the next age to occur, where we have the Mesozoic, this middle age, which is the age of the reptiles. The mammals started to get big, they got smacked down by this great extinction, and now ultimately the reptiles start to diversify to give us dinosaurs. Dinosaurs evolved into birds, as well as we've got all the other types of reptiles, snakes, and lizards. We had mammals continue to evolve, although they stayed small at this point. They weren't what we would consider normal stuff. They're more rodent-like. We got flowering plants, so we start to get plants that seem fairly modern. They wouldn't have just been ferns or conifers. During this time period, we see lots of changes with plates. We see these large chunks of basically crust move around and form different configurations. So we had Pangea form during this time, which causes all kinds of evolution to occur as things cope with changing climates. We also see Pangea break apart during this time, so you've got to cope with that. So there's lots of stuff that's occurring here right up until the end of the Mesozoic, when an asteroid came, smacked into the Earth. We see this layer of iridium, which is something we find in asteroids. That's called the KT event. So we've got this thin layer that's pretty much around the whole world. And then after that, we see just about nothing in the fossil record for a bit. So this would have been another big mass extinction that caused lots of problems and wiped out most of the things that were alive at that time. Now, once things started to rebound, the things that made it through this mass extinction, the Cenozoic, the current era, we started to see that reptiles didn't take over again. Instead, mammals started to take over. So we see mammals occupying, the top niches aquatically. We've got whales. We see the dominant predators on land. You've got saber-toothed tigers. You've got bears. You've got all kinds of fun stuff that's kind of dominating, but it's mammalian. You see elephants instead of Apatosaurus. And so this is going to be the age that allowed for us to eventually exist. So the last 100,000 years or so, you've really seen the dominance of humans. We're kind of the tail end of currently what is the Cenozoic, the age of the mammals. This is the modern age.